All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Quill and Hammer, Reforging Fiction. I'm Trevor.
And I'm Zach, and today we're going to be tackling the third installment of the Pirates of the Caribbean series at World's End.
Absolutely. Now, there are a lot of things that I like about At World's End, and then similar to Dead Man's Chest, there are things that I don't understand at all. Zach, what worked for you at World's End?
Well, I think what they did really, really well is all the action stuff. You've got the fight in Singapore, which was super chaotic and super fun, especially where you had the three factions. You have Barbossa and Elizabeth and their whole crew. You have Sao Fang, and then you have the British Army that shows up, and it's kind of a three-way battle royale, so to speak. Then you have especially the very end when you have the fight between the Pearl and the Dutchman, and you've got the Maelstrom in the middle. Davy Jones, who is basically immortal, fighting off three skilled swordsmen all at once in the forms of Jack, Will, and Elizabeth. I mean, it's all done very, very well. It's very exciting. The set pieces are great. Um, but other than that, I'm not entirely sure. What do you think, Trev? What did they do well?
Well, so I liked certain things. Plot wise, I liked how you had to get everyone together. It kind of turned into this last stand. The opening scene where, the East India Trading Company is just slaughtering anyone who has any remote connection to anything pirate related, like shows how bleak it is.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I like the idea of you have to have some way to get all of the pirates together. You have to have some huge threat. That's what the East India Trading Company turns into.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that idea of a last stand with the pirates.
Mm-hmm.
Our way of life, our freedom versus, the East India Trading Company. I thought that setup did really well. But as we discussed in the previous movie, a lot of things kind of fell flat for me when it came to the plot.
So, what are those things that fell flat?
Well, to be honest, I don't understand the nine pieces of eight, other than it seemed like a half-baked idea to get the pirates together.
Mm-hmm.
They went through all of this trouble to one, recruit Sao Fang, and then get to uh, Shipwreck Cove, and then they had their little council thing, and they, end up what's her name? Making Elizabeth the Pirate King, and then what? And then they didn't do anything. They just kind of the pirates just stood there while, the Black Pearl fought the Dutchman, and then when that resolved, they that was it. It was like, hooray, we did it.
Right.
That wasn't believable for me. The other thing that we talked about, it's the same stuff from the last movie. I hated the tension between Elizabeth and Will
Mm-hmm.
because it was unnecessary. You can have so many things going on in a relationship. I know you and I have talked about this. It's like you finally, in a TV series, you finally get the couple together and then no one knows what to do with it. And so you have like marriage problems or infidelity
Right.
or they fall out of love or there's just tension, and it's like that that just seems like a cheap ploy to me.
I agree.
And then I didn't like how they kind of made Jack seem insane.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean, I get that he's been in Davy Jones' locker for, and who knows what amount of time, but I didn't like that either. And my biggest complaint with both of the sequels, I guess all four of the sequels, is that they've just taken such a radical change in Jack's character. He's no longer the cunning, um, cold, not cold, but the cunning, calculating guy that we see in the first film. And it's like, yeah, maybe he's strange, but everything that he does has a purpose. It's not just, well, I'm drunk and insane and don't know what I'm doing and somehow it works out. It's not luck. It's he's cunning. He's calculating. He can make the most of any situation. And I feel like they kind of lost that as the movies progressed.
no, I absolutely agree. But let's jump into what we do, Zach. Let's reforge this movie, starting with the beginning, um, the setup. So we finish Dead Man's Chest with Captain Barbossa being resurrected and brought down. Now, like I said, I don't necessarily disagree with that, and it sets up a reason why we have to go after Jack. Um, because we need, he is a pirate lord. He didn't pass on his role as a pirate lord to anyone, so you have to go get him if, you know, you're going to free Calypso, which is all of Barbossa's plan. But I don't know, the start of the movie, you have to go get the charts, you have to find a way, but it didn't seem like, or you have to find a way to Davy Jones' locker, but then it didn't seem like the charts did anything to get to Davy Jones' locker.
Right.
But then again, I now that I say that, the point of the charts wasn't necessarily to get to Davy Jones' locker. It was you almost need him to get back.
You need him to get back. And I can understand that. Um, I think to fix the opening and maybe a lot of the plot, for me, I don't think you start adding deep lore elements like, all of a sudden there's this council of pirates in the third film. It feels like it's a little late to the game to start adding these huge things, these huge portions of lore into the films. I because it in at the end of Dead Man's Chest, it wasn't, oh crap, Jack was a pirate lord and he didn't pass it on to anybody. Everybody felt guilty. They wanted to bring him back because they loved Jack. But then at the beginning of the third film, it's just, oh no, we just need him. If he'd passed it on to Will, then we wouldn't be here, type deal.
Right. And I I know we talked about this in the previous movie, but the changes that they made to Jack to turn him against what he was in the first movie it's hard to stomach. And so that kind of continues all the way, and that's his main plot point through the entire film is am I going to be a scumbag or am I going to, like at the end of the film, like they know he's supposed to make the right choice, but like they don't show him being the pirate, the guy
Right.
who's, we've said it before, pirate and a good man. He's just kind of annoyingly weird. And then at the end of the movie, instead of him taking over the Dutchman, he saves Will's life.
Hmm.
So that oddity that they play into the wrong parts of Jack.
So
But
how would you fix his character arc then? What would you do to change it?
all right, so we talked about the way that we would have ended Dead Man's Chest is with Jack willingly sacrificing himself.
Right.
not necessarily, you know, the way that it ended with Elizabeth randomly kissing him and then this whole tension between, whoever and or Will and Elizabeth and all of that. But like, so if you go and you say, all right, first you end on that note. Jack willingly sacrificed himself to save his friends. And then his friends, realizing that, go and save him, not necessarily just because they need him. They all
Right.
went and saved him for that. And maybe Barbossa, who, has shown in, the past off screen, but still in the past that he isn't really a friend of Jack's. He's, the mutinous first mate that made himself captain and then whatever, he clearly has his own ulterior motives.
Hmm.
But I think uh you need the bond between Gibbs, Elizabeth, and Will to bolster Jack because I'm not saying that like Jack can't have second thoughts because he gets back from Davy Jones' locker and he's kind of like, gosh, I sacrificed myself for everyone and we're in a worse mess and I don't know, like maybe I should just wash my hands of this all or whatever, But then you've
Right.
got the things that he cares about, which are his friends and his crew and the sea and wanting to um move forward and be free and all of that and be that good man. But the entire point, everything he's trying to do is, I just want to live forever because then I can, you know, uh, have all the wenches I want and all the rum I want. And it's like, that's not what made Jack Jack.
Right.
He wasn't just some, you know, sleazy pirate who's trying to, sleep with every girl that he got with or that he could find and was drunk all the time. And, like that wasn't what made you love Jack in the first movie. So, you have to change that from, he's trying to live forever to he really does want the freedom, and in the first movie, it's like a ship isn't just a mast and sails and blah, blah, blah. That's what a ship is, or those are all the things that make a ship. But what a ship is freedom, and that's it's like I'm a free man. This is great. We don't see that part of him. We
Right.
just see him scheming, and that's the main point. What are your thoughts on that? Sorry, I rambled for 5 minutes.
No, I think you do need to you need an obvious goal that Jack has that isn't, just self-centered. There needs to be a reason why he's debating between taking over the Dutchman or standing and fighting, right? And you have to be able to sympathize with both sides to make that a believable and sympathetic type of dilemma for him. But I don't know. I think, like you said, a lot of the things that were wrong with it is his um, apparent insanity. I hate that they downgraded him in that way. He's just random. It's like nothing is calculated. I know I've kind of said this already. Nothing is calculated. Everything's just luck, it seems. And yeah, I think Jack's character would be served better by actually making plans with people. You know what I mean? And I think that's a lot of the problem with the plot in general is all the characters all have their own ulterior motives. None of them talk to each other. It's like you kind of have lost all the camaraderie that you built up in the first film. And you kind of feel that as the dead man's chest progresses. you start to lose the camaraderie between Jack and Will, and even Will and Elizabeth. And then by the third film, it's like they're all just there for their own ulterior motives. And it's kind of hard to keep track of what everybody is doing and what they're willing and not willing to do to get to their own and selfish goals.
Right. Now, you and I talked about this again in the last film, but uh, one of the characters that really bothers me is Will.
Hmm.
Um, that whole dynamic between Will and Elizabeth and Will and Jack, and he's just trying to, save his father at all costs. And, you and I both love our dad, but, if it came to the love of our lives or our dad and we had to choose, um, we would choose the love of our lives.
Hmm.
But that's not even the case. It's like you can do both. If you work with Elizabeth, if you work with Jack, and you can say, listen, I really need to save my dad, but like we're in this together, the three of us.
Right.
Let's do it. Instead, he's doing his own thing and he's just betraying everyone. Um, he betrays Elizabeth, he betrays Will, he just kind of does what he wants. He it just drives me insane that again, he starts as this very idealistic young guy, and then he goes on this adventure with Jack and he realizes the world isn't as cut and dry as it seems, but you can be a pirate and be a good man, but you can still, like be a good man, and you have that dynamic between the label isn't necessarily what makes you a good person, it's what you are doing. But then he goes completely against all of that, and in the second movie he just abandons that, and then he continues to abandon it in the third movie, and then at the end of the film it's like, okay, we're all gonna forgive everyone and we're just gonna randomly marry them on the ship during the fight, and then he's gonna stab the heart, and then he's the new captain of the Dutchman. And it's
Right.
like I don't disagree with the idea, but like the idea of it should have been, okay, Jack, Will, and Elizabeth all have different reasons they want the Dutchman, you know, taken care of. They need Davy Jones out of the way. Um, and they can all agree, like, hey, Jack is probably the best person you know, to lead the Dutchman. But even if he's immortal, he's not necessarily free because he has to do the job of the Dutchman, and then he can only go to land once every year or whatever. And but like they kind of decide like, hey, who should be one of us has to stab the Dutchman,
Hmm.
stab the Dutchman, stab Davy Jones' heart, and take over the Dutchman. And if we do, then we can be happy, we can do whatever. Not be happy, but like I don't know what I'm trying to say there. But that's like their goal. Because if they have the Dutchman, then they have some way to fight the East India Trading Company.
And I think taking that angle would make a lot more sense. And maybe you can still have the Tiadama slash Calypso arc, have that be Barbossa's goal, because maybe he doesn't trust Jack. He thinks that, if Jack becomes captain of the Dutchman, he's just gonna go do his own thing and he's not gonna actually help the pirates. Um, but having Jack, Elizabeth, and Will work in concert and make a plan about Jack ultimately becoming the captain of the Dutchman so that again, he's sacrificing for his friends. He's not going to have that freedom that he wants. He's going to be chained to a job, but he's willing to make the sacrifice because at the end of the day, he is a good man. And as you were talking about the good man thing again, the entire point of that has been lost. None of them are good people anymore. All of them are just serving their own selfish interests, and you're supposed to side with the pirates because that's the name of the film.
Right.
You don't see any redeeming qualities within them. You see some very horrible qualities in the East India Trading Company, so it's obvious you're supposed to hate them, but you don't see any good things about the pirates either. And you're kind of just supposed to forget that pirates pillage and murder and all that kind of stuff in between these movies type deal, if that makes sense.
Right. To be honest, thinking about it, the only person whose choices I respect are what's his name? Why can't I think of the name of the guy from the first movie, the
Norrington?
Norrington, who at the beginning of the movie and as you go, you can kind of see him fighting this dilemma of like, okay, this is not the Navy I grew up with. This is not the Navy I joined. We're making worse and worse decisions. And then, ultimately he sacrifices himself to save Elizabeth and the pirates and keep their job going because he recognizes, hey, uh, the side I'm on or thought I was on isn't the right side, and gosh, I gotta help these people get away. I'm choosing a different side. We're gonna go and do this. And then when it comes down to it, he says, crap, it's either my life or all of our lives, and he stays behind
Right. And
and dies.
and that's the kind of sacrifice you want your heroes to see or to make.
Hmm.
Not the former villain or former antagonist that suddenly has a change of heart. I respect Norrington's decisions and I don't mind his arc at all. But I wanted that from Will or from Jack, or heck, even Barbossa deserves to make a sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Right.
But we just didn't get that. We didn't get the payoff that I was hoping for.
Right. And we didn't. And it comes back to the the characters didn't act like they didn't follow the same arc that they were set up on in the first movie. And because of that, instead of progressing this way, they just kind of regressed. And then the horrible thing is at the end of each movie, they bring him back up to like, see, Jack did decide, yeah, he was
Mm-hmm.
chained to the mast and he didn't have really any choice. And then, but that last scene you see is him with the sword going to stab the Kraken, even though he knows he's gonna die. And then at the end, it's like, see, Jack is a good guy because rather than, be selfish and, let Will die, he saved Will's life. See? And it's almost like, okay, but he didn't show any of that through the film.
Right.
He was just manipulative and, you know, cowardly and
Funny enough, as you talk about that, a line that Norrington says in the beginning of the first film comes to mind. One good deed is not enough to save a man from a lifetime of wickedness.
yeah,
One good deed is not enough to redeem a man of a lifetime of wickedness.
So it seems enough to condemn him.
And that's said in the first film, not knowing who Jack is, and then you find out, hey, actually, he is a good guy.
right.
But then it completely flip flops, and they go against that entire idea. And sure, there's your one act at the very end of the film where he decides, okay, I guess I'll do what's right for once, and we're supposed to believe that that's enough to redeem him in our eyes, so to speak.
Hmm. Here's the thing that I know we've talked about this, but like there's a deleted scene in At World's End. I've seen it once, but I can't remember the full extent of it. But like it kind of explains how Jack knows Norrington, and he was transporting slaves or contracted to transport slaves.
You
And
mean Beckett, how Jack knew
oh,
Beckett.
did I say? Yeah, sorry, Beckett, not
Right.
Norrington.
Sorry.
But
Continue.
he was transporting slaves for the East India Trading Company, or was supposed to, and he let them go. And because of that, they burned the Black Pearl and made him watch and branded him a pirate, and that's where Jack becomes Jack Sparrow. And
Right.
then that's how he gets the pearl is Davy Jones raises it, and that's why the significance of the 100 souls is because he let 100 people go, 100
Mm-hmm.
slaves free, and all of this stuff kind of you would see, yeah, he's a good man, but then what happened? Like, yeah, he had some hard times, but he's still a good man, just trying to be free and live and whatever. And then you know, almost immediately after getting the pearl, it's taken over by Barbossa and like just tons of things that you don't see and that are cut out that would make you think, okay, yeah, he is a good guy.
Right.
But
And sorry, go ahead.
no, no, you go ahead.
Um, I was just gonna say that you you know what? I lost my train of thought. It's
Well,
all you, T.
it's the character again. But going back to the plot and kind of we've talked a lot and kind of jump back and forth, but like to begin with, if we say, all right, they need to get the charts so that they can go and save Jack, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would absolutely ignore the part about Will. Will immediately at the start makes a deal with the East India Trading Company because he wants to save his father.
Right.
I hate that part. I hate that guy, the weird captain. I don't even know if you know his name. That he's not a captain, but like Beckett's
But
second
the
in command.
right, the guy that gets grossly suffocated by Davy Jones's face tentacles.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Um, I hate that he makes a deal with that guy. Someone else should have done that, not Will, because
Yeah.
you need some way for the East India Trading Company to follow them, but it should have been someone else.
Right.
Like maybe Sao Feng. He should have done that instead of Will, because Will, we need that camaraderie again. They are all on the same side. They're not stabbing each other in the back. And then they go and they save Jack, and they get back. And obviously, I like the kind of conflict between Barbossa and Jack about who's the real captain of the Pearl, because
Right.
they both have a claim to it.
Right.
And so I like that, and I like that Barbossa is has his own ulterior motive, and even I mean you can live with the Teodalma um Calypso arc, like he's clearly trying to do that. To your point about, okay, yeah, but then they introduced all this stuff in the third movie. They should have introduced some of that in the second movie.
I agree.
Like like a little throwaway line here about the Pirate Council, or why Davy Jones is out there in the first place, like
Hmm.
all of this stuff. And then you know or like a reference to Calypso being um chained or whatever, like things like that. Just a couple of throwaway things, then you get into this other movie and then you can call back to them.
Right.
But then let's move on. So you've got Barbossa trying to do his thing. Jack is trying to save his life. Clearly he doesn't want to die.
Hmm.
And he still has the whole what's it called? The debt to Davy Jones that he, is trying to get away from. And this would do both of it, or accomplish both things. But like the freedom, getting rid of Davy Jones, all of it can kind of carry on. That's where they're all going towards. But like you have to see that the majority of his motive is trying to make the ocean, the seas a better place, trying to bring freedom to everyone, all of this. And then I don't mind, like we said, the pirate lords, like you need some way to get all of the pirates together, but then they don't do anything.
Right.
Um, but let's like keep going. I'm fine with uh Barbossa freeing Calypso, but then what happens? What's the point of freeing Calypso other than she creates that huge, whirlpool that they fight in, and then what?
Right. It
But
was, and I think at least talking from Barbossa's perspective, the idea was we've got these insurmountable odds, and if we get the goddess of the sea on our side, we'll we'll be able to overcome it.
right,
And I get that, and I think if you make that portion of Barbossa's intentions more apparent, then that whole arc makes a little bit more sense. But you have Calypso turn into this giant after she's released, and then she speaks in essentially gibberish. I've looked at it before. There's no rhyme or reason. It's not some language. It's just gibberish, essentially.
hmm
But you should have had Tiadama condemn them for something and say, I'm not going to help you because you've done these things, not just, well, she's pissed, I guess, and then turned into some crabs.
right,
It's like you, there has to be a reason why she's not going to help them,
right,
more than just, yeah, well, the first Brethren court imprisoned me and now I'm holding a grudge. Or even if that's the case, then, say that.
right.
But it's very confusing. It's like it doesn't make sense to the viewer.
It doesn't. It fell flat because the execution failed.
Yeah,
And like I said, I don't mind that it was there, and they're, he's fighting towards something, and then it's like Barbossa, speaking of fighting towards something, Barbossa accomplishes his goal and it doesn't work. And
hmm
everyone's hopes are riding on this, and then it fails. And I don't dislike that. But like you said, why didn't she, you know, why didn't she fight? Why didn't she side with them? Why did she, it falls flat.
right,
The point I wanted to make though is if you make that more clear, this is what he was fighting for. This is, she's going to help us. Instead, it's like she's gonna give us boons, and you don't say anything. That's it.
right,
And then it doesn't work out. Um, and then if that happens and it's like this was our one chance, it's as clear or whatever, and then you have Elizabeth give her speech, and then they go and um, fight the Dutchman or whatever, and they win. But um, but I don't think that should be the end of the film. The So let's say, they all get together. We've talked about how the plan is for Jack to kill Davy Jones and take over the Dutchman. And I even don't dislike the part where Will and Elizabeth get married on the deck. Like I think that's a
right,
fun scene. I think it would have been better if every time they tried to get married before, something happened. Like if it was
Right.
just not like a running joke, but a running theme is like they tried to get married at the beginning of the second movie. That didn't work. Somewhere in between they tried again, or whatever. And like
Right.
that maybe is a tension, like is this doomed to fail because we can't get married or whatever?
Right.
But then ultimately they get married and I like that. And then it's like, okay, but now Will's gonna die. And you
Right.
have this dilemma with Jack. Does he do what he wants? Does he save himself? Does he save Will? Like, I like that dilemma because it's like the stakes are real.
Right.
And we all knew that as soon as Will was stabbed, what was going to happen.
Right.
But still, the dilemma needed to be there so that the payoff could be there. But it would have been so much sweeter had they made Jack's character not this selfish, psychotic, whatever, all the way up to the end.
Right. So what do you do with the plot after the Dutchman is defeated?
Well,
You have in the film you have Beckett's ship coming to attack the Pearl, and then the Dutchman shows up, and Beckett thinks that it's still Jones and that he's gonna, they're gonna destroy the Pearl, but then it's actually Will. He swings in, and you see that oh crap look on his face, and he knows there's no hope.
right,
But then after that, the entire fleet of hundreds of ships just turns around and leaves. And I don't
right.
think that's very realistic. So what do you do to reconcile that? And kind of like you said, all the other pirates are just sitting there on the sidelines watching the Dutchman and the Pearl fight it out. So what do you do there? What do you do after the Dutchman is defeated?
Well, here's the thing, Zeke. You brought them all together for a reason. They need you need the pirates there because the whole plot is the pirates are going to be destroyed if they don't go. The East India Trading Company is there. We need to free Calypso so that we can save the seas, save our way of life, be free, all of that. But then, like you said, the Dutchman fight happens. The Black Pearl survives. Beckett's ship comes out to destroy the Black Pearl. The Dutchman comes up, and then they have that scene, right?
Right,
But then everyone turns, or all the other ships, once Beckett's gone, they leave. And it's like hundreds of ships just leave.
right,
Now, it's not realistic. It really isn't. And the whole situation isn't realistic. The East India Trading Company, the British Navy, they wouldn't all gather in one spot. Like that had to have been every ship that was ever constructed for the British or whatever.
right,
So I feel like they you know, you need to make them have an overwhelming force, but the entire overwhelming nature of their force is the Dutchman being the tip of the spear because no one can kill anyone there.
right,
They are immortal, so it's like, okay, we've got ships to back everyone up, but the Dutchman's just gonna sweep through and we just need to stop them from leaving. So I think
right,
if you said they have double or whatever the amount of ships the pirates have, then that would have been more realistic. But then Beckett's ship dies, sinks. You see him die, and that's great. But I feel like you need that to happen. And then you've got the Pearl and the Dutchman heading towards these other ships, right?
Right.
Well, those other ships aren't just going to give up because all of these people came all the way across the ocean to eradicate the pirates. And one
Right.
person's death isn't going to change that. And so you have to have that fight. You need all of the pirates to fight rather than they just kind of sit there. They don't do anything. None of them fight for their freedom. They just are like, yeah, we won, hooray. But it's no, you need another 10 minutes of the film showing everyone fighting and then the ships running away
Right.
because it's not realistic to see all of them just turn and run when you've got maybe 15 ships to their hundreds, you know?
Well, and you think about the same maneuver that the Dutchman and the Pearl used on Beckett's ship. They could do that 10 times over to the nine ships that the pirates have.
Right,
So it's like there's no reason for the British Navy and the East India Trading Company to flee.
right.
And I do have a problem with, it's like there's just the one the one crew that makes all the sacrifices and then everybody reaps the benefits. You
Hmm.
know, and I get that, it's a movie. You have to place the emphasis on the heroes, but it would have made a lot more. I don't know. It would have felt like the Brethren Court was a real group if they actually took some part. It's like everybody's fighting for the same thing. Yeah, we might contend one with another, but we're coming together to fight the bigger enemy, which is the East India Trading Company. We all want our freedom and we're all there to claim it.
Right. Absolutely. And maybe if they fought like simultaneously,
Yeah.
like if you had roughly the same number of ships between the pirates and the East India Trading Company and the British Navy, with clearly the British Navy being outnumbering them, and then the British Navy has the Dutchman, right?
Hmm.
But if the main fight is happening between the Dutchman and British or yeah, Black Pearl, and then Beckett's ship is just kind of waiting in the wings, and then you've got, the rest of the chaos of all of these ships fighting each other or whatever. And then the Dutchman goes down, everything seems lost. The pirates give up because it's like, shoot, you know, or not the Dutchman goes in. It seems like they're gonna win, and then the Dutchman comes up and everything seems bleak and whatever, but then they turn and the Dutchman's on their side, and then they're all like, yeah, we're gonna win. And then they chase them off
Right.
because you don't really see the rest of those ships realize, oh no, we're screwed. Because
Right.
now the thing that was our biggest asset is not ours anymore.
Right.
And so if they're all fighting simultaneously and it looks like they're going to win, but then they go and they kill their flagship, and then they're like, "Oh no, I don't think we can fight all of these people and the Dutchman and the Black Pearl and we don't have our leader." Then it becomes more realistic to say, "All right, we need to get out of here."
I agree.
But ultimately the thing that matters most is the good man. They're all together fighting for a common cause, even if they have their own ulterior motives. They're all trying to do something, but then they come together at the end because when it comes down to it, it's like what Elizabeth said. Well, what are we going to die for then?
Hmm.
Not going to die for your ideals. It's like, okay, well, what then are we going to die for?
Right.
So then they all fight, they're all trying, and then they win and they overcome the odds. But it isn't satisfying because one, the majority of the pirates don't do anything. Two, Jack, Will, and Elizabeth just magically all, get back together or whatever. Will and
Right.
Elizabeth's relationship is just magically solved after they are cold and betraying each other and just weird for 2 movies and then uh you know
You know, just as a side note, I always thought it was kind of weird well, you can't go on land for 10 years, so you have to be separated. What do you mean? Jones is on every ship that is on the sea. Just anytime you want to see Will, just
right,
float out onto the flipping ocean. You know what I mean?
right,
Like,
yeah,
not that big of a deal.
it's
Anyway,
not
just
it's
as a
not
side
but
note.
but whatever, whatever, Zeke.
So to recap, in the beginning, you have to have the search for Jack be motivated by a desire to actually save him because they feel guilty for him having sacrificed himself and they want him back. That
Mhm.
has to be the beginning. Next, you have to have the betrayal come from somebody who is not Will or Elizabeth.
Yes.
It has to be somebody like Sao Fang, and I think that's a good idea because you have he's a member of the Brethren Court. He's one of the pirate lords, so it's still a weighty betrayal. He's still a mole in their organization, but
Hmm.
it's not Will or Elizabeth.
Right.
Next, once you get Jack back, they have to all come together, the three of them, and say, okay, what are we all doing here? Why did we come get you, Jack? What's the problem? What's the state of the sea? And how are we going to overcome these odds? And then you start formulating the plan of, okay, well, the only way to take out the East India Trading Company is if somebody is in control of the Dutchman. And the only way to do that is to kill Jones and become the Dutchman, the captain of the Dutchman yourself. They decide that, okay, well, Jack, it's got to be you, or maybe Jack said it's got to be me, and is willing to make that sacrifice, and that's the plan. You have Barbossa making his side plans, and maybe having a question of is there going to be some treachery there? You get to the Brethren Court. Their plan was to make Elizabeth captain in the beginning, or excuse me, Pirate King in the beginning, um, so that she can declare war. And then in the final battle, you have to have all the ships engage somehow. You
Yes.
can't just have both sides waiting off to the wings. They have to engage, and it has to look bleak and hopeless. It's not just, oh, well, these two ships are circling each other, and we're 2 miles away and we can kind of see it, but we have no idea what's going on. And all of a sudden the Dutchman goes down, but then it comes back up and oh no, but then oh yay, because now they're leaving. There
Right.
has to be some skin in the game for it to pay off.
Right.
Did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I like we said, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the bones of the plot. It's the execution with the
Right.
characters and with the elements that they put into play. But I think that sums it up. I think that with those changes, the things that bother you about At World's End and Dead Man's Chest resolve themselves because it's not, like you said, it's not the plot, it's the characters acting different than what you saw at the end of uh, movie number one. They all
Exactly.
come to this certain point, they all make progress, and then it's like, we're just going to throw all that away and embrace the quirky things that we think people thought were funny. And yeah,
It's a classic case of sequelitis. Putting
sequelitis. I feel
putting
like
in
we're going to end
tension.
up talking about sequelitis a lot on this podcast, Zeke, because It's real. It
It
happens.
is real. And it
And
happens all too often. It's a pandemic.
it is. And certain things and themes will come, at least that we believe, would fix the sequels and is like the cure to sequelitis, but we just it's just you and me, Zach.
It's
We
just
can't
you and
change
me.
Hollywood and directors and the money grabs and all of that, but we can try.
And we can reforge fiction in the process.
Absolutely. So we're going to leave it there for today. We will be back next week with another episode. We're not sure what we're going to do. If you have any suggestions, please email us. Let us know what you want to see, what movies you want to see reforged. We will do our best to get to them, get through all of these amazing movies that had so much potential, but kind of fell flat.
And if you got any ideas about how else we could have fixed at World's End, drop a comment down below, get a discussion going. Let us know your ideas. We want to hear from you.
And if you want more Reforging Fiction, subscribe and share with your friends. We love talking about this stuff. We love these characters. We love these stories. We love the books, the movies, all of it. But sometimes it just isn't there. And so our goal is to fix it all. We will catch you next time on Reforging Fiction. We are Quill and Hammer.